No.
I got some vulgar friends. No, not those
Name of
kind of
that
nuts.
river?
I'm talking about nuts you eat. Like,
The cottonwood. Wasn't that the
The
cottonwood?
name of that river?
Pecans?
The pecans.
It means pecan.
pecans?
But it's an oasis.
Yes! You got it, Eddie! Way to go, the new aces.
We should have known that, right?
You should have known that, turkey. But that's the point of this discussion.
I know it.
See, it helps me too when I go over. All right, so you got the river of nuts. The only kind of nuts down in this country is pecans.
What about the five hit this table? No, okay.
All right, so we crossed the river of nuts. I have the original Spanish account, which, by the way, wasn't discovered in the Spanish, well, actually in Mexican archives until 1909. A guy named Genaro Garcia found Alonso de Leon's original journal that he had recorded all this stuff. Yeah, they knew he wrote it, but they didn't know where it was. They found it
Where was it?
in the Mexican archives, Mexico City, 1909. Can you imagine? What, just 100 years ago, whatever. All right, so they start reading that, and they figured out he came up here. He got about somewhere around here, and he learned from the Coahuiltecan Indians that there was a strange person speaking an unknown tongue over here. But the Indians couldn't understand it. And when they tried to articulate it, Alonso de Leon figured out it was French, because he spoke French. So he said, "Oh, summon him to me." And so when he said summon, boy, you came, because he is a big hot shot, you know. So they brought this Frenchman over here. I think his name was Jetro, Louis Jetro. There were about 5 of them that survived. And so he said, "Yes, I do know where Fort St. Louis is. I will guide you there." And so Alonso said, "Okay, take us over there." So from here to the site of Fort St. Louis that LaSalle established is about 60 miles. And it was, turns out, on the mouth of Garcitas Creek. It wasn't even on a major river. And sure enough, LaSalle had admitted he made a mistake and was lost when he landed there, and he knew it wasn't right, and he figured out he was too far west. So he takes off going east trying to find the Mississippi River. And he gets over into East Texas, right along about the Sabine River, not quite that far, and his men mutinied and killed him. And they buried him under some brush pile or something, and his grave has never been found to this day. So they come back, and then they all died except about 5 of them. Jetro, 2 of them left journals. That's how we know what happened. I can't remember. I'll think of it in a minute. The other 2 Frenchmen. There's a fascinating story attached to one of them. Remind me to tell you later in modern day. But anyway, so here they go on this. Can you imagine? He'd done this 5 times before trying to find it. They take him over there and he finds the remains of the French fort. Finally, after 5 years of searching. What's there? Nothing. The Karankawa Indians, who turns out were cannibals, and had probably eaten the Frenchman. Yeah. Had ransacked and burned the fort, and they found a woman's skeleton with a baby and French Bibles, and blowing pages in the wind. You can just picture this desolation and everything. The Spaniards said, "We disposed of the French cannons in our normal manner for the next 300 years." Historians all over Texas been looking for it because they didn't know what the normal method of disposal was, right? Did you take them to Mexico?
I tell you what, they threw them in the river.
Threw them in the river is what they did a lot of times. Or did they melt them down?
Bury them.
How were they gonna melt them? They had to just throw them in the river.
All right, good ideas. So that was the biggest mystery in Texas historical archaeology until 1998. And guess what happened in 1998? If you read all the books, which I have read, almost all of them, especially Bolton's Spanish exploration in the Southwest, that's the key. And they found La Salle's journal, and he had drawn the cannons, you know, like where they had placed them and everything. They were trying to figure all this out, but they never had found the location of Fort St. Louis. So in 1998, a bulldozer operator was plowing this brush like we do over here, clearing the field, and he hit something. And he thought, that's not normal. And it was right about this time of day. And it was on old John Kieran's ranch. And John Kieran was one of these purist guys that didn't want you to kill a rattlesnake. He didn't want you to cut up brush. You know, he was just a purist. He didn't want you to do anything to the land. But it turns out that he had been plowing up 17th century French pottery for several years. Well, how do you explain French pottery in east coast of Texas, right? It's kind of hard to explain except Fort St. Louis. But he never told anybody about it. He didn't want anybody down there. But this guy, so he gets off his bulldozer watching for Uncle John to appear, and he goes over there and scratches 10 inches underneath the surface of the dirt and unearths the muzzle of a 17th century French cannon.
Did this guy even know to look?
No.
He was just a bulldoze operator.
Yeah,
He didn't know
he
any
didn't
of the
know
history.
doodly squat.
Now, where was this?
60 miles right over there at Garcitas Creek.
Okay,
Right about the present town of Victoria.
okay,
You can look it up on the map. It actually was
Texas, okay.
Garcitas Creek.
okay.
So he just, got in his pickup and drove off. Called the University of Texas. And the University of Texas came down here, quarantined the whole damn ranch, locked all the gates, said don't anybody enter. We're closing off this place, nobody get it. So for the next 2 years, they excavated that site, and that site was Fort St. Louis.
Really?
They finally-
Unreal.
And can you believe they never found it until 1998?
So what happened to the owner of the ranch? He just had to go along with it,
He
right?
had to go along with it because it was Texas state law.
They
Okay.
just take working on.
So they dug up the cannons, and it was 6 17th century French cannons.
How
2
well
of them
preserved were they? How well preserved were they?
really well preserved, and they're in the museum at Victoria. We can go see them. I think they gave 2 to the University of Texas by Bullitt Museum in Austin. And they found La Salle's original ship, La Belle, out in the bay.
That's a fascinating story.
Fascinating story. Under 60 feet of water. But we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so they found the fort. Now, fast forward back to Sincaja. After all that, that's why you have a French flag over Texas. 6 flags over Texas, right? 6 flags over Georgia, because of French. All right, well, here, maybe 100 years later, here come the Spanish. They get attacked at Sincaja. They hastily buried the silver that they were carrying, the pieces of 8. Y'all all know what a piece of 8 is. Pirate.
Spanish piece of 8.
8 reales.
Currency, Spanish currency.
Which, by the way, was legal tender in the United States until 1824 or something. Can you imagine? Like you could spend it if you go down to the grocery store, And if you bought this beer or a piece of bread or something that didn't cost, a whole one, they would cut it into a piece